Welcome, guys, to the Improvement Season podcast with myself, Steve Hall, and my German friend, Pascal Flor.
Yeah, once again here in London.
And this week, we want to do actually the review of the conference that we went to, hosted by Martin McDonald with Alan Aragon, because obviously we didn't review it last time because we hadn't done it. So it was a single-day conference, going over various elements. So kind of, I can remember the latest from, the biggest takeaways of the year from the research review that Alan Aragon does. And I'm trying to remember what else there was. Just like latest findings and like most interesting aspects that he's.
Do you have your notes here on the table?
I think I saw them. So
I'd be surprised.
What is this?
I think this is not notes. This is client. This is a consult, I think.
Bro training.
Yeah, consult with someone who was doing bro training, pretty much.
Okay.
So in terms of like Alan, in terms of just him as a presenter and as someone who engages the audience and everything, he's only ever got better. I've seen him present, I think, 4 times or every time he's come into London. So he just gets
4 times already.
Yeah, every time he's come, I've seen him. So I think that's how many times he's been over. At least I think I've seen him every time he's come into the UK. Otherwise, I'm talking out my ass. But I've definitely seen him 2 with Luke. And then 1 with the Personal Trainer Collective that did one in Bath, and then this one. So I think that's 4. Yeah, I've seen him 4 times. Yeah, he just gets more confident. He gets more swagger, and he just gets better jokes coming across, and it's just nice to see him. It's really his element. He even said that himself. Like he loves the research review. He did like coaching, but he kind of really likes now presenting, which he does so much. And like practice makes perfect. So yeah, him as a presenter is really engaging, and he just gives across information really well. So that was excellent from that standpoint. Martin ran it really well. The day just went really, really well. Lots of kind of good takeaways for us in terms of kind of when we are going to run conferences in future, we will be with Mike Israetel and maybe some of the RP gang. So that was good. Why are you laughing?
Yeah, the RP gang. There are some different camps and gangs out there battle each other. Yeah, totally agree.
So yeah, and then it was nice to see what his biggest takeaways were over the research review over the years. Obviously, kind of the nutrient timing study, which is, I think, still the most searched in PubMed. Not PubMed, it's in a sports nutrition journal, which is fantastic and really cool. And it kind of brought me back to a lot of the things like I already know and I knew, but it brought me home because you sometimes kind of get led a little bit astray with all these other things that are out there, especially when science is always dynamic, it's always evolving and changing. But if you listen to the podcast with Menno Henselman, where he talked about I talked about like the new exciting things that are coming out, anything new and exciting. He was like, really, no, it's just grounding back, and everything's reinforcing the principles that we already know, and it's putting them in their place. So stuff like I'd been seeing some interesting things coming out on like social media and stuff about nutrient timing and specific like intra workouts and stuff, and then Alan comes out with his alien piss slide and things like this, and it just makes you realize kind of and I can't know if I remember the quote exactly, but one of the quotes I posted on Facebook was people often think about kind of the nutrients they're taking in now, whereas you should really be thinking about what nutrients are available to me now. So kind of like that pre-workout versus the post-workout versus an intra-workout, and like meal digestion times. And I can't remember, I think it was you, Pascal, who pointed out when he said like the fastest digesting protein, whey protein, doesn't kind of get into your bloodstream till an hour till it's like fully there.
It's funny because I do remember that time when he actually pointed that out or talked about the nutrient timing and making sure or thinking about when the nutrients are actually available for the system and for your body. That I looked back because Steve was sitting behind me or across the table, and I looked to Steve and we both noted that one. And it's quite funny because it was a really important point, I think, that when people get so focused on the peri-workout nutrition. And in the end, perhaps it's not really as important. Of course, it's more important when you're training more often throughout the day, so twice daily perhaps. So when you're a high-level athlete, for example, or when you train fasted, you don't have the nutrients available from the previous meal or something. But when it comes to things like, as you pointed out already, the fastest digested form of protein, which is whey protein in a liquid form, it still takes an hour to get into your system, even in a fasted state, which is quite a surprise to me as well, that it takes so long. And then you really need to take into consideration when you're eating a meal right before training time, does it really give you the nutrients or the energy for this session to be more beneficial or something? I highly doubt so. And this also then goes so far to the thing we've talked about in the past when it comes to show date and when you're loading on carbohydrates. This, I don't want to make it somehow of a call out or something, but on a show day, pounding yourself with carbs might not be as important and beneficial as the time prior to the show itself, leading up to the show, because the muscles probably can't fully make use of the carbohydrates on that specific day, and more so it will leave you a little bit more bloated and potentially a little bit more bloated, and also could cause a little bit more of distress in your digestive tract, simply because you're not used to actually eat that much amount of food, because there are enzymes in your digestive tract that are now used to for a certain amount of food, of volume and nutrients. And when you're then in 1 week give the body even just double the amount or 3 times the amount of carbohydrates, it could potentially lead to some kind of distress in the digestive system.
Yeah, that's why one of the things you have to be really careful with if you use like Cliff Wilson's rapid backload, in which carbs are like often 1,000 grams, potentially more than 1,000 grams for a large male. Like he has to dose them through the day, like in really small, precise amounts, because of all like the gastric distress that people can experience. And this is partly why the front load and then maybe following it up with a back load is quite a kind of strategic and sensible approach in many ways, because it gets the body then used to producing that amount, and gets it comfortable. So then when it comes to the second time, it's a bit more predictable. It's a bit more normal. So no, that was really interesting. And yeah, I always think that on show day, it's kind of show day, you should be ready. Like that's when you shouldn't have to really manipulate too much. And most of the people I speak to seem to have that point of view as well. And it was interesting. Menno has kind of obviously he does the shitload, and like I think it was like 2 hours before he does the high sodium, potentially pretty high fat, high carb meal. But if you're going to do stuff like that, you definitely need to have tested that out. That was sure. Interest.
I just wanted to touch on one more thing. Sure, the body is more sensible when it comes to carbohydrates or even nutrients in general to uptake them, because you're in such a depressed state. But I think that when you take it too far, there might be potential risks or downsides to it, leaving you not your best on show date. So I rather err on the side of safety, eating into the show, than try some fancy things. This is why Cliff has nailed it down and is still working and improving his approach to the rapid backload. And all the people who are trying to copy it have failed with it, or most people do. I don't really know of many people out there who actually do it the same way, because every time they tried it with themselves or clients, they failed miserably, and it left the client or themselves in a worse position.
Yeah, and it's definitely more risky.
Yeah, and also I think when it comes to the entire thing, an idea about peak week strategies and stuff like that, most of the ideas behind it and the approaches behind it stem from a time of drug bodybuilding or drug use bodybuilding. And this applies to so many methodologies out there that don't really apply to the natural athlete. And it's funny because when you talk to people like Dr. Joe, someone like Jeff Alberts, who else was it? Lane Norton. Everyone just says when it comes to natural athletes, and even here, the mountain dog, what's he calling him? John Meadows.
Yes.
Even he says that when it comes to peak week, you don't really want to mess it up, and especially when it comes to natural athletes, just eat them into a show. This doesn't mean that this is the only way to go about it. But it's way better because the system simply functions differently compared to someone who's on drugs.
Yeah, it's just more predictable and more consistent for sure. So yeah, that was a big take home, was kind of re-emphasizing the where in the hierarchy nutritional timing comes, and how really it is like the biggest bang for buck is going to be the simple basics, calorie balance by the end of the day. Spreading your protein throughout the day is a good idea, but apart from that, everything else is going to matter much, much less, which is always good because it's good, but it's also frustrating, and I can see why. And I can see why myself, I kind of got into a rabbit hole of looking into all these things, and potential effects they could be having, potential supplements I could be having that might make this difference. Because once you get to a point of knowledge, and you've been using that knowledge for a long period of time, and it's got you consistent results, and it's those really fundamental basics that now have become habits, and they're not hard to achieve, like hit my calories by the end of the day, making sure to land within my macro ranges, and spreading my protein throughout the day is a doddle. I don't find that hard whatsoever, and I appreciate other people do find that still difficult, but because that's a doddle, I'm then looking at all these tiny little things, these minutiae that might provide me some benefit. And whilst that's fine, I have to remember the core fundamentals and not get led astray from those and place too much importance on these small, tiny details that maybe they could make a less than 1% difference, but at the end of the day, just aren't worth the amount of invested time that potentially might be required to actually know what.
And I also think that it's important to point out what you just said, that it might lead to some benefits. And it doesn't really even is guaranteed that it will. And also, if it will, can you really tell the difference?
Yeah. I don't know if you wouldn't ever be able to identify it, would you? So it's kind of like, do you want to risk it doing nothing by taking it? It's kind of, for me, it's like creatine, for example. I take creatine every single day, like 3 to 5 grams. I don't really know whether it's doing anything, but there's huge amounts of data backing it, and it makes good theoretical sense. That's creatine. It's cheap as well. So I'll back creatine. But these other ones, these tiny little ones, then becomes the risk to reward ratio really shifts. So for creatine, it's like, okay, that's kind of a no-brainer for me. But these ones where there's very scant data on it, and then it's going to have even less effect than creatine, and I can't even know if creatine's doing anything. Am I going to take those?
Something, I mean,
really
there are so many supplements out there, and also just not really supplements, but also just general food. When we talk about garlic or talk about cinnamon or something like that. Yes, when we take a look at examine.com, we will definitely find some beneficial studies supporting some kind of benefits for the entire system. But in the end, would it really make a difference when you have nailed down everything already, when you are a healthy individual, when you are obese or dealing with some kind of health issues? Does it really make a difference? And I doubt it, actually, because the studies most of the time are done on people who are not in a healthy state,
like diabetic, or something,
for example, or who have some kind of deficiencies,
or rats,
and or rats. And if you don't have any kind of deficiencies, or you are necessary, or you are in need for those kind of vitamins or minerals or something, does it really make a difference?
It's like test boosters.
Totally.
Like a lot of the studies are done on people who are deficient, and but for someone who's healthy, it will bring your test levels up, but not to any degree that's going to do anything for you. So no, stuff like that's really interesting. And I think stuff that's becoming more what would warrant more of my time kind of maybe not stressing about, because you don't never want to stress like that would be a good, like relaxing more is probably going to pay off for me more than looking into all this money. Actually, if you are looking into all these tiny little supplements that might benefit you or not, you're probably an individual who's maybe a bit anxious, a bit stressful. You probably do well to just chill out and see better results.
Not only that, the question could always be that why are you investing time and effort and also money and those kind of things? Why not invest even more time in improving your stress management, your fatigue management, or also your sleep?
Yeah.
Because I think that everyone, if we are honest with ourselves, everyone could improve on those kind of fields, just to a marginal extent, right? And why not then try to improve those kind of fields, try to have a little bit more focus? And those things most of the time come for free.
Yeah.
Right, and then try to, it's like as if people try to find a way around it.
Yeah.
Finding an excuse.
I find that with like a lot of the time, even with deloads, people always try and find ways around deloads. People always try, especially like if they're trying to find ways around deloads, they're never going to want to do a maintenance phase. So yeah, it's just always, I think fatigue management, no one really likes to do fatigue management. They like to get around fatigue management, and supplements are obviously, they sound good because that could potentially bolster fatigue management a lot of the time, but
and it's not a time investment.
No.
It's just like, okay, you need to take that pill and everything is solved. But when it comes to fatigue management, it probably means that you need to spend an entire evening just sitting in front of Netflix or putting on some porn and don't know
what's it called, therapeutic touching or something. If you invested more time in like Tinder and taking the girls and buying them nicer drinks, that might pay off.
For me, it never worked out. It actually caused more stress and anxiety than.
Do you pay for the drinks, Pascal, if you go out with a girl?
Hardly ever.
I was going to say, this is where you're failing. You have to pay for the first drink.
But I'm living in Berlin. And everyone is like more autonomous.
Maybe the girl always
can take care of themselves. I mean, that's my experience.
This is for
anyway. So nothing.
So what else did you take away from the conference?
So I talked about it last week already, that I really do enjoy meeting up with the people I once only have met on the internet before. So the interaction between the people and getting to know them on a personal level, I really do appreciate. This is also something I send a personal message to Martin, for example, and just thanking him for this great opportunity to participate and meeting him in person as well, even though it was only a short amount of time. I think that there's always more to it than only talking over the internet. And there are some individuals on the internet, for example, Patrick Omfrey, who's always kind of present, and he seems like such a humble guy. And I would love to meet him at some point. You have met him?
Met him, I think, just at Bath. Yeah, I met him. Yeah. And he got ripped to shreds by James. by like everyone took the piss out of him on their slides because he has a great face. I very much doubt Patrick will be listening to this. So.
Is that the powerlifting face?
Yeah, it was.
Totally. No, but this is definitely a highlight of mine, but I already mentioned that the last time. But when it comes to the presentation itself, first and foremost, definitely the thing about nutrients and when they are available for the system. But also, it's quite funny because I disagreed with a couple of things Adam mentioned or talked about. This had to do with something like intuitive eating, for example, because I'm under the impression that something like intuitive eating, at least in the realms of people who are tracking and who are trying to do something for their body composition, is hardly not achievable anymore. Because even when you think that you are intuitively eating, you have built such an awareness of what you're putting into your system that subconsciously you will always track. And this isn't then intuitive eating, because intuitive eating is just based on your hunger signals, without any kind of emotion to it, without any kind of knowledge behind it, just going by feel, going by what the body craves in that situation. And when it comes to this, I mean, I could imagine that there are some people who actually would be able to pull it off, but someone like me, never in the world, because I never really learned to listen to my body when it comes to satiety levels. When I'm really, really hungry, because I think I've never been in that state where I experienced true hunger, what that actually means. And also when it comes to satiety, I always need to stop and prepare a meal beforehand, count the macros, find out how much calories is in that meal, because I couldn't just stop by my hunger sickness. And I think that this is a problem that is created by how you are actually raised by your parents. Finish your plate. And I think that this is, especially in the Western society, a big problem when it comes to the parents, that it's a bad thing when you leave the plate with food on it. And when you are young and you learn to always finish your plate, and you eat over your satiety levels all the time for your entire life, basically.
I just wanted to, sorry, just because it's literally on this point, listeners might be able to relate. I remember in primary school, we'd have school dinners and you couldn't leave until you finished your plate. And I can remember chucking food on the floor to get out, and I got sent to the head office.
Holy shit.
It was dried apricots. Did not want to eat those.
Yeah, but something like this, right? I have a similar story. In kindergarten, I hated green beans when I was young. And
yeah, I like dried apricots now.
there was 3 days in a row where we were served green beans. And I seriously disliked them, and I didn't want to have a portion of green beans. And it was that every single child did get served one plate and they needed to finish it. And 3 days in a row, and it stuck with me. I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and I can still remember that, because it was such a bad moment in my life, in my young life. But yeah, I think that this then causes the problem that your feeling of your body and of satiety levels is kind of becoming a little bit screwed, and you never actually learn to listen truly to your body. And even if you think that you are in control of it, I highly doubt it, because emotion always plays a role in it. And especially when you then combine that with always being in control over your macros for a couple of years on end. I mean, someone like Aragon or Alberto Nunes says it as well, that you're tracking macros for that at some points you don't need to track macros anymore.
But you are unconsciously.
Exactly. And this is why I think that potentially, of course, I'm not 100% certain, because probably I didn't think of all of the scenarios, but I could imagine that it's highly unlikely that people like us are truly able to do truly intuitive eating.
To me, it's similar to saying this to Rob Zand yesterday, and in terms of like my steps, and how like really I'd like them to get to a level where I just do a number of steps that is what my day demands, and I don't really think about it. But I found myself, like when I'm uploading client updates, for example, or like compressing them on my phone, whereas before I would have like sat down and just done it, but now I'm like walking back and forth. Or if I'm leaving you a voice note on WhatsApp, whereas before I just sit on my ass and just record it, now I'll be walking up and down the flat. And it's like things like that, because now I've tracked my steps, I'm now thinking about it. It's now no longer like an intuitive thing. It's a habit that I've created.
Totally.
So I think even if I was to do intuitive eating, it would never be completely what the definition of intuitive would be, because it would be based upon the habits, like lean lifestyle habits that I'd created. So I think it would always end up being under a framework of previously having tracked. So no, it's an interesting.
And I agree. Oh, well, I totally agree with that. And I also had this conversation with Jan, a friend of ours, about intuitive eating.
You better be listening to this, man.
Yeah, mate. But the thing is that it all boiled down to the term intuitive.
Yeah.
And intuitive means that kind of, you are really listening to those kind of instincts. You're not driven by emotions. You're not driven by rational decision making or something like this, but more so just the kind of the instincts in yourself that cause you to, okay, now it's really time to get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that perhaps it might be able, or you might be able to pull it off when you're really training for it. But other than that, especially in a society where food is as available and as palatable as it is nowadays, hardly doubted that it's actually able to do so.
You see it with people all the time, like they have a dessert stomach.
Yeah.
So then they like, I'm full, and they leave food on their plate. Charlotte will do this. Charlotte will do this. And she'll have food, but then it's like, I'm like, so what are you eating that for? I thought you were full. And like, dessert stomach.
Yeah.
I can eat some sweet stuff.
Totally.
And this is one of the variables that are now there. There's so many variants in food, and we know this from I forget the researcher, but like more variety, we eat more. So like when you have a celebrations box, if they're all full of Snickers, you probably eat maybe 2, but because they're full of like Malteser, Snickers, Mars, Dairy Milk, Milky Way, you're like, right, I'm gonna eat that, and then now I'm bored of this, I'm gonna recycle.
Totally, and you bring up a good point, because when we take a look at the obesity rate in Western society, it is increasing like massively. And why? Not because the people are aware of what they're eating, because I think most of the people out there are eating intuitively because they don't have any awareness of what they put in their mouth, but because the system always tries to come up with the highest reward.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just imagine you are starving. You are a caveman, right? You're starving. When you have the chance of getting a chocolate cake, high in fats, high in carbohydrates, stuff like that, or
delicious,
just a lean meat, what would the body want in that situation to survive? Of course, the food with the highest outcome for survival, right? And when we're then thinking about the society nowadays, when we are intuitively eating, we will always try to get the tastiest thing, the highest reward for the system, for the body, because it doesn't really give a shit about how we look.
No.
It only wants to make sure that we are surviving, right? And when we're then only getting back to the intuitive eating thing, it will always pick the more palatable food, more rewarding food in terms of survival over the salad, for example.
Actually, this brings me to a question I want to ask the audience now, because this is a question I wanted to ask Alan, and I'd asked Pascal, and we kind of had, I don't know if we had differing point of views, but we just weren't sure. And it was, my thoughts were in terms of a calorie surplus. So we know we need to be in a calorie surplus to get the maximal muscle growth. For maximal muscle growth, for anyone really, to maximize muscle growth, calorie surplus is going to be the easiest way to do so. Now, we don't know exactly how big of one we might need. We know we need one. And the bigger, potentially, there's diminishing returns, and we might gain more muscle, more fat. But I was basically saying to Pascal, what if you could give a client a minimum kind of off-season intake, and then the rest, if they wanted to go above, they could go above it, if their hunger signals were saying so, because you think if you're in a surplus, you shouldn't be hungry. And my thoughts and reasonings were, if someone's following typical flexible diet, if it fits your macros, where 80% of their food is coming from wholesome, good, nutritious sources, so they're hitting their fiber, they're getting lots of fruit and veggies, they're at a healthy body fat percentage, they shouldn't be like having low leptin because they're trying to maintain a low body fat, and they're in a pushed surplus, so they shouldn't be producing great amounts of leptin anyway. So their hunger should be low. They should have a low appetite, and the minimum kind of intake you give them should at least satisfy them. So if they're then feeling hungry on top of that, you give them, say, you can overeat, like you can go over this, because is that a signal that the body is like, hey, you're pushing yourself really hard in the gym, you need to eat more? And I was like, could that work? But then there's so many other factors that come into it. And this is something I wanted to ask Alan himself. And Pascal said to ask Alan, we didn't get an opportunity to. Martin, I'm not happy. We didn't get our Q&A with Alan. Yeah. Martin also won't be listening. But so I want to put it to you guys, the people watching. Like, what do you think? Do you think that could work as an approach? I'm assuming it very much depends on the individual. I think for me personally, I think in my head, it makes kind of sense. So I would probably let myself eat a bit more. And for someone who is a bit adipophobic and who doesn't like to gain fat, I think it might work better as a strategy. Whereas I think maybe for someone who is, I don't want to say greedy, but someone who gains fat a bit easier and is maybe less concerned about it and might just be like, oh yeah, they might do better with maybe a maximum. And then if they need to undergo it, they can undergo it maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that's...
No, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. And I think that we could leave it here now.
Yeah, we need to go. We're seeing Christmas tree. We are having a Christmas meet up with some of our clients, which is super exciting. And both of us are massively appreciative of seeing them, and actually really sorry and sad not to be able to see the rest of our clients and even you loyal listeners, because I'm sure there's lots of them that we'd love to meet up with. So no, we're going to go and enjoy that, and I'm sure you'll probably see that over social media.
Absolutely. So on that note,
yeah, cheers guys.
Cheers guys.
I guess this might be the last episode before Christmas. I think it will be.
Yeah, totally. So guys, have a lovely, lovely Christmas. If you are bored or feel bored over the Christmas holidays, I hope not, but if you do, then you can always join our Facebook group over on Facebook. We make sure that we link it in the description below. Other than that, you can always re-listen to all of our previous podcast episodes to keep you
We do.
Yeah, totally. We do. Absolutely. To give you some kind of company and also something to do over the time. And other than that, we are now always doing a live Q&A each and every week. Steve and I are doing a live Q&A. So one week it is Steve, and the next week it is me again. We are doing it over on our Facebook group. So make sure to check in on that one as well. And other than that,
yeah, we'll leave it there. Yeah. Merry Christmas, and we'll catch you in the new year.
Yeah, cheers guys.
Take care.